Welcome to Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Guiding Families Forward Through Divorce with attorney Ann Hamer. Ann is a family law attorney and founding partner of Hamer and Taylor, with offices in Memphis and Nashville. She works with families throughout Tennessee, helping high net worth clients navigate divorce with discretion, strategy, and a focus on protecting what matters most. My name's Sean O'Connor, and today, Ann and I are talking about business ownership and divorce in Tennessee when those coincide, and why these cases often involve much more than simply dividing assets. Ann, good to see you.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
People own their own business, they're married, they're going to get a divorce, it gets complicated. I get it. What makes divorce cases that involve business ownership fundamentally different from other divorce cases?
So, when you own your own business, like I do, um, you have a complex set of finances that are outside the marital finances. I have
Hmm.
business bank accounts. I have business contracts. All that in my law firm is outside what if I were married, what my spouse would know about, right? Um, in addition, you might have a spouse who has worked in the business. You might have a
Huh.
spouse who knows literally nothing about the business. You might have a business where capital contributions have been made with marital money. You might have a business that is on the rocks. There are businesses that our Supreme Court in Tennessee has said really don't have value, like a law firm. There are businesses like a dental practice that not only have value with repeat customers, but have actual equipment, right? That
Asset,
needs to
yeah.
be valued. That's very, very expensive. So every business is different. Generally, my clients will come to me and want to have the business valued. It's important to do it, but then here's the problem. Let's say you get a business valued. Maybe it's a business that's making my client 150, $200,000 a year, but the business is worth $1 million. Maybe it's worth 2 million. It's a really good concern. Someone would come buy it. So now I've got a client who just doesn't make the kind of money to be able to buy the spouse out of the business. Um, that we see more and more often. And so you've got to get real creative about how long-term alimony is going to look. Or is this a case where somebody needs to get the house and the other person's going to be living in an apartment for a while, but they get to keep this business they built? It's tricky. And a lot of people will come to me, Sean, and say, my business is not worth anything. But it generally is. Not always, but it generally, there's some value there.
Yeah, it is interesting too, where it's like, it's a supporting your lifestyle, and yet, yeah, I mean, you're not necessarily liquid in that case, and that can be tricky. Just sort of dividing those assets. I'm curious, are there certain types of businesses uh, that you found create more complexity during a divorce proceeding?
Yes, for sure. So, let's say you're an investor, it's somebody who's working with a big private investment firm, or
Mm.
even if they're publicly traded. With investments, it can just be so tricky. You might have restricted stock units. You might have
Mm.
vested or unvested stock in this business.
Mhm.
Um, that can be hard to value, and it can be hard to put a value on as of a certain date. So everyone's trying to figure out what's the value of this item that is now marital, and what date do we want to put down, right? I mean, we just started a war when, like, a month and a half ago. And so before the war, if you had ownership in an oil producing business, something in somewhere in oil production, you might have been psyched. Now you might be more psyched, right? Like,
Mm.
oh, wow, I'm really glad we waited. But then is that going to change? And are things going to change again? And so some businesses that are very cyclical, depending on the market, are hardest to get a nice firm value on, that everyone
Mhm.
says, okay, I'm ready to admit that that's the value. It's not going to go crazy up. It's not going to go crazy down. Buy me out now. Those are tricky. Family owned businesses can be very tricky because people keep things close to the vest, maybe
Yeah.
don't share information with their spouse. And they may be hiding assets through either partners or family members who are partners, um, that's someplace where we see problems. And you have
Yeah.
to have a good forensic accountant to go through and start tracking that kind of thing.
And how do Tennessee courts approach the question of whether a business is marital property, separate property, partially both? I know it's complicated. You spoke to a couple of points earlier. What are some of the bigger issues that show up there?
So there's a legal concept called transmutation.
Oh,
And transmutation is just what it sounds like. You take one thing and turn it into another. Something could be separate property, and that could be the business. And through the behavior of the people who are married, it becomes transmuted into marital property. So here's an example. Uh, this is an actual case. The husband was helping his wife who had a real estate business. And he would sometimes go out and hammer signs into yards. That's what he testified about. Most of the time, he lay on the couch watching pornography or playing video games.
okay.
So he wasn't a super big help to her. And the court found that, and they said you haven't transmuted the business because you went and hammered out a few for sale signs. But there is another case where the wife came into the family business and she was the bookkeeper for
Yeah.
years and years.
Yeah.
And when you're providing that kind of a value to a business, um, if you're the bookkeeper, if you're what we see now is maybe one spouse is really good at IT
Yeah.
or any
Taking care of
kind
the
of human
website, all the marketing stuff, whatever it might
all the
be. Yeah.
marketing stuff, right, and you come in and you bring that value to a business. Yeah, I mean, you could have transmuted it to some extent. So it's very fact specific. If you own
Yeah.
a business before you get married, we should do a whole section on prenups. There
Yeah.
ought to be
Well, I
a
was gonna
prenup.
ask, but yeah, well,
There just ought to be a prenup. Some businesses inherently don't have value. A law practice does not. All I've got is this stuff back here and my brain. But like we were talking about, a medical practice might nowadays, if they own their own MRI machines, things like that. There can be value, even though it's a service providing business. Are there contracts? Are there repeat customers? That kind of thing to look at. So we can always find value in a business, and we can always try to figure out a way to get the client either paid or for our client to pay the other person out. But if you've got a separate business you started before the marriage, my advice is a prenup.
keep it clean, so to speak, keep it separate. Yeah. You'd mentioned earlier that we were talking about speaking of businesses and how to value them and divide those assets. And certain businesses are inherently cyclical, right? Whether it's energy business, whatever it might be. What usually drives disagreements over like the business valuation during a divorce? Are there other factors besides the volatility of markets?
Well, volatility of markets is something we do see. Um, Trust is the biggest issue in a divorce because obviously the parties aren't getting along. And it can
Right.
cause one party to feel that they've been kept in the dark. And they may very well have been. If they don't work in the business, if they don't know anything about the business, if all they've heard their spouse say is, oh, yeah, it's worth blah, blah, blah. We're going to retire at 55, honey. This is fantastic. This is, going to be our honey hole over
Yep.
here. And then the next thing they're hearing is, this isn't worth anything. It's basically a dump. We're getting out of it. I can't, there's no value. Then it causes trust issues
Hmm.
for sure. And when there are
Sure.
trust issues, the best way to handle that is just get two good forensic accountants. Somebody's going to have to value the business on one side, somebody's going to value it on the other. What I can tell you our courts do when there are two valuations, they will very often take a middle ground on that. If
Just
Yeah,
all right.
just
We'll
I
split
can't
them.
tell. This one looks good. This one looks good too. A good cross examination goes a long way into convincing a court that the expert on the other side hasn't properly valued a business. But there's something called the generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP. And as
Right.
long as your expert is using the generally acceptable accounting principles to value the business, then like minds can think differently, right? So what we do see though with our experts, with the experts I personally use, is that we get pretty close because my experts aren't going to go out on a limb, or they wouldn't be an expert the court would repeatedly trust. So they want to get a
Mhm.
valuation that makes sense. And then we go to the other expert and
Yeah,
say,
their credibility is on the
right, like,
line.
do you understand why this is the
Yeah.
valuation we did? Why do you think it's different? Um, and that can work out, and that's how that's really honestly how it should work out.
And this leads to my next question, which is, okay, where, the business owner and others are busy, there's a divorce going on. And meanwhile, uh, there's also a business going on that needs to be run, and there's conflict, and I need to take time away from running the business to see, to tend to divorce issues. I'm thinking that this can impact the operation of the business itself, right? If things get too what have you seen? Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, it does. It's sad. It's sad. Well, so there's two different ways to look at this, depending on who your client is. There's something we call the divorce flu,
Mm.
which is when the breadwinner all of a sudden says, my business just not doing that well now. And yeah, last year it made $500,000, but this year it's only 100,000. Then there is the legitimate concern and actual truth.
Yeah.
And this does happen to some of my clients where their brain is not there, right? They are devastated about their divorce. They are busy trying to figure out what are they going to do now, as far as they don't have a partner, so they got to figure out parenting, they've got to figure out schedules, they don't have the time that they had before or the support they had before. So while the divorce flu is something
Yeah.
that we all joke about because we see it over and over and over, it's also a real thing. I do
Mhm.
have clients who have bad years because it's a year they just can't focus. And it depends a lot on their business. During
Mm.
my divorce practice was almost non-existent. I mean, I had several months where I just couldn't even I could not make a sentence in court. So my partners stepped in and they were super helpful to me and picked up cases that needed immediate attention. But it's hard, you're going through a lot. It's very stressful. And so I do feel for the people who I know are having a struggle. But then sometimes you're also looking at it and you got to be, pretty serious about, now come on. You can go back and make the money that you were making before. This didn't all of a sudden go downhill the day you got divorced.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can see both sides for sure. There's the obfuscation that happens, and then there's the legitimate, like, I'm 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 emotional, I'm a wreck for whatever reason, and I cannot, I mean, people have their limits, I get it. With just the few minutes we have left, Dan, I'm wondering, what have you seen in terms of financial or operational mistakes that business owners might make early in a divorce process that creates problems later in the
I'll tell you my big one. I'll tell you my big one. The first one that really, really shocked me. I wasn't the lawyer at the time, but when we tried to finish out this case and mediate this case, my client had sold his psychiatric business for $1 to his partner. I can't, don't go selling it. The minute the divorce is filed, you have to keep
Yeah.
everything in the status quo. So now, how's that going to look to a judge? It was worth $1. That's what you really think we're going to believe? Again, psychiatrists are a little like attorneys, except they do have
Yeah.
repeat customers, right? So there is a value. It's not a huge value, but it is a value. And to sell it for $1 and say, well, that's fine, that's what it's worth. No, you can't do that. Um, we saw one recently where one of the parties transferred a piece of property out of his LLC
No.
to his mom. Okay, no, you can't. That's it for free? For free? Is that how your business operates? No, of course it's not. So those things that maybe you think you're going to get away with,
Yeah.
just don't. Just keep it quiet. Just keep the status quo, everybody. And then that makes your lawyer, it makes it so much easier when we're explaining to a judge what the deal is, because you look honest and that's how you want to be. You want to it's never worth it to save a little money on the front end with crazy stuff like
Yeah,
that.
you mentioned earlier, I mean, so much of this is about credibility and trust, and it's hard, right? Because the relationship is crumbling, and that trust is at, a pretty low level probably on the old relationship account, and then You go out there and try and do some smoke and mirrors with assets and yeah, I can see you're like shooting yourself in the foot here. Like you might have been able to negotiate something equitable. Like, hey, listen, we own this property here and that, but instead you went and tried to hide it and now you're gonna get, you know, A, caught, and B, you're gonna end up in worse shape probably as a result.
In worse shape because now we've got to go tell the judge what you did. It's just don't do it. Just be on the up and up. Look, marriages fail, and that's okay. It's not a perfect institution by any means, but you can look pretty darn perfect, and there's really nothing wrong with looking like and being the person who does have the credibility with the court. That's the client I want to have, and it certainly makes it easiest for my clients if they behave.
Well, and I'm guessing too, that's less time spent, less money spent, less time away from your business if you own one, the rest of your life, all of that. So, uh, again, easy to understand, sometimes hard probably to execute on that advice.
Right. Just get focused and get through the divorce.
Well, Ann, we're out of time, but as always, great talking to you. Thank you.
Sometimes hard to do, yes.
That's it for guiding families forward through divorce. Thanks for joining us.
Sean, thanks for having me.
If you're considering divorce in Tennessee and you want to work with Ann and her team, visit their website, hamertaylor.com, or you can visit annhamerlaw.com to learn more. And be sure to like, leave a review, subscribe to the show, maybe share a link with someone in your world who is dealing with a divorce issue right now. That'd be great. I'm Sean O'Connor. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.